A rivalry renewed and a border war restored as Virginia Tech is set to hit the road for Huntington, West Virginia for just the second time since 1940. That's Robert Bateman. That's Wesley Clark. I'm Carter Hill. So thrilled you could join us on this week's edition of the 3304 Kickoff Show. And guys, let's get right into things. I mean, Virginia Tech coming into the year, I think everybody wanted to see 6 wins. Progress, right? That was their goal. Well, currently sitting at 1-2, I feel like if the Hokies are to reach their goal, this is a must-win this weekend.
I can't help but agree. Injuries have plagued this team, and honestly, I see if they lose to the Thundering Herd, the Hokies are staring down the barrel of a 1-7 start to the season, Carter.
Yeah, I mean, when you're a Power 5 team and you play those non-Power 5 teams, you have to beat them. Because when you look at the Virginia Tech schedule, you know, they had to play 2 Big Ten teams, and it was difficult. They had a hard time playing them, but we now get into ACC play. Florida State, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Louisville, all 4 of those teams are undefeated.
A win over Old Dominion, a loss to both Rutgers and Purdue. Last weekend, a 35-16 defeat at the hands of the Scarlet Knights. And for more on that, let's send it up to Piscataway, New Jersey. Nels Williams, what do you got for us?
Back-to-back Big Ten opponents, back-to-back losses for Virginia Tech as the Hokies fall in Piscataway to Rutgers 35-16. Looking to bounce back after a close loss to Purdue last week, Virginia Tech dug themselves a hole early on and never quite recovered. On the second play of the game, newly minted quarterback Kyron Drones fumbled, with the Scarlet Knights recovering and taking advantage of the miscue on the ensuing possession as they would score to go up 7-0 less than a minute into the contest. It was the second week in a row that the opposing team would score a touchdown on its first drive against the Hokies.
We have to start better. I don't know if it's a confidence thing, maybe the way we start practice. We're going to look at it as coaches and certainly talked about it as players. You know, we know the team that we can be, right? There's signs of it in both of these losses. There's signs of it in moments. You know, we have to be the team that we're capable of being more consistently throughout 4 quarters.
Although the Hokies would score on back-to-back possessions in the second half to bring it within 5 points, Rutgers would seal away the victory thanks to a 55-yard touchdown run by Kyle Monungai, who would finish with 147 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground for the Scarlet Knights.
He's running very, very hard. He's running smart. He's running determined. And thank goodness, right, because he's helped us win games.
All eyes are on Virginia Tech quarterback Kyron Drones, who was starting in place of an injured Grant Wells. Drones finished his first collegiate start with 190 yards thrown, 74 yards rushed on the ground, an interception, and a passing touchdown.
Yeah, I would say inconsistent, but I think there's some really good things. You know, he made it hard to defend him. He had some nice balls today. He did a really nice job running the ball. He did miss a few reads that I think left some plays on the field. His decision-making was pretty good. First college start, I think there'll be a lot to build from. Certainly some good things, but I think he would be the first to say a bunch of things we need to be better at.
Both the Scarlet Knights and the Hokies are on the road next week as Rutgers takes on Michigan in the Big House and Virginia Tech faces Marshall in Huntington, West Virginia. For 3304 Sports from Piscataway, New Jersey, I'm Nels Williams.
All right, Nels, great stuff up there. Little dark up there at SHI Stadium, much like the Hokies' performance against the Scarlet Knights. Well, guys, also, I think Nels hit on one of the main storylines in this ballgame, right? And that was Kyron Drones' first career start with Grant Wells going down, and I think he looked pretty good.
Yeah, he did look good, but Grant Wells still questionable. We don't really know his timeline. Brent Pry, every press conference, it seems like the only word to describe Grant Wells is questionable.
Right.
He's getting some snaps. We don't really know how many, but we know he's coming back at some point. We just don't know when.
And like you said, Drones' first start, you know, he had those jitters, and you had to give him some leeway when, you know, you had your first start. But once the game progressed, you know, he got more comfortable with the offense.
Yeah, got better as the game went along, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, did a really good job. I also think about the quarterback competition as a whole. And in the preseason, Grant Wells versus Kyron Drones. And I think a lot of the fan base lauded for Drones to be the starter. Grant Wells starts the first 2 games. Kyron Drones gets his opportunity this past weekend. And Drones was talked about being so much better on the ground, Wells better in the air. Well, I actually thought Drones provided a spark on both sides of the ball offensively.
Yeah, I mean, Drones, you mentioned it. He can run the ball, lights out. He really expands that pocket, can find the gaps. And also, he seemed to throw the ball well, too. I don't really see why he's being criticized for his throwing ability because he's making good check down throws when we need him to.
Yeah, I mean, he had 190 yards in that game against Rutgers, and he has been the spark on the rushing side in the offense, and you got to get those running backs in the game, and I think that would be a key to beating Marshall.
No doubt about it. Well, it's funny, too, because we touched on Grant Wells recently being banged up for Tech, and unfortunately for the Hokies, they've had some injury problems across the board. So for more on that, Kendall Williams, we send it down to you.
Wash your hands and cover your mouths because there's a bug going around, and I'm not talking about the stomach bug. Virginia Tech football has been hit hard with one of their biggest injury bugs in the beginning of the season in a long time. And worst of all, it's some high-profile players that are catching it. Grant Wells, Jalen Lane, Nasir Peoples, Ollie Jennings, Nick Gallo, Jeremiah Coney, and Taki Heath have all sustained injuries in just the first few weeks of the 2023 season. It all started with senior tight end and captain Nick Gallo, who went down in preseason tearing his ACL, which benched him for the rest of the year. A few weeks later, matters only got worse as Ollie Jennings, Jalen Lane, Nasir Peoples, and Grant Wells were all sidelined last weekend in Piscataway after sustaining injuries during Game 2, ending in a rough loss to Purdue at home. Now, Ollie Jennings and Jalen Lane have obviously been big hits to the receiving corps, and most Hokie fans are more than eager for their returns. Although it will be a game-time decision, things are looking pretty bright for Jalen Lane, who's been battling a knee injury since the loss at home. On the other hand, Hokie Nation will most likely have to keep patiently waiting for the return of wide receiver Ollie Jennings. But the bigger question and anticipation is on who will be behind center at QB1 for Virginia Tech in Huntington this weekend. Grant Wells, who transferred from Marshall after an impressive first 2 seasons for the Thundering Herd, I'm sure would be more than eager to face his former team at home. But with it being just the 4th game of the season, the Hokies won't make any rash decisions in forcing his injury along. Whether Grant Wells is given the go or Kyron Drones makes his second career start in the maroon and orange, the Virginia Tech offense will have to make some improvement from their performance in Rutgers last weekend. Even though the stat sheets from Piscataway didn't show anything too concerning, the Hokies' ability to finish in the red zone was a very apparent struggle. With ACC play opening up next weekend against Pitt and a bowl season still in hopes, it's safe to say the Hokies will need to start finding themselves back in the win column. Guys.
Thank you, Kendall. Really highlighting a lot of the Hokies' issues regarding the injury bug. All right, guys, let's shift our focus now to Marshall. The Thundering Herd, a once proud program out of Conference USA, has shifted to the Sun Belt 2-0, wins over Albany and East Carolina, a bye week last week, and they can present quite a few challenges, especially hosting a Power 5 opponent for the first time since 2018.
Well, Carter, 2 weeks ago, Rasheen Ali had 3 rushing touchdowns against ECU. He's been absolutely electric on the ground, and the Hokies' defense struggles against the run, so we'll see what he can provide the Thundering Herd come this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we saw back in 2018, this Marshall team had over 240 yards, and, as the Virginia Tech defense, you have to contain that in order to win this game.
We talked about first Power 5 foe to come to town since 2018. The atmosphere has got to be electric, right, in Huntington this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, atmosphere is a big thing. Traveling on the road, especially when you're a smaller team playing a bigger Power 5 team, you need to be loud. You need to throw those teams off. And we'll see if that Thundering Herd can produce the thunder.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, Will Laughlin dives more into the Thundering Herd and how they can beat you in a lot of different ways. So let's send it on to Will.
We are Marshall is the infamous chant you'll hear from the Huntington faithful if you ever have the pleasure of catching, say, the #1 ranked Thundering Herd men's soccer team on the pitch, a men's or women's basketball game at the Cam Henderson Center, and of course, you'll never hear the Marshall fans bellow the beat louder than at a Marshall football game inside Joan C. Edwards Stadium. And in 2023, there's been plenty to cheer for those wearing bright Kelly green and white, as Marshall football sits at 2-0 and are well rested for their upcoming matchup against the Virginia Tech Hokies, having come off an early bye week. So far, the Herd have thundered their way over the likes of Albany and East Carolina with a more ferocious attitude when that pack of hyenas trampled poor King Simba to his death. Now, Lion King jokes aside, the king of Marshall's castle has been the signal caller, Cam Fancher. Once a backup to now Hokies quarterback Grant Wells, Fancher's development has been picture perfect. The junior quarterback has completed 69% of his passes, throwing for 446 yards in the air in just 2 games. And speaking of offensive firepower, the Herd's leading rusher, Rasheen Ali, has been an end-zone magnet this fall, scoring 5 touchdowns and gaining 6.2 yards a carry on the ground. Now, flipping the field, Marshall's defense has been another massive factor in their success, as the Thundering Herd ranked first in points allowed in the Sun Belt at 15. But diving a little deeper, it appears that Marshall's big men are giving them an edge on both sides of the ball. Now, defensively, the Herd have amassed 10 sacks, good for 4th in the Sun Belt. But on the other side, though, 0 sacks allowed by the Marshall O-line. And funny enough, in a full circle moment, the big boys up front for Marshall will have a tough test going up against one of their own when J.C. Price's defensive line group rolls into Huntington, looking to break that sackless streak. Now, as everyone knows, Price was, of course, the co-defensive coordinator for Marshall from 2012 to 2020, giving more significance to a contest between the Herd and the Hokies that will be decided in the trenches for sure.
I love it, Will. Well, I do want to keep it with Marshall because I think there's a lot of interesting storylines with this ball game, and Tyler Katz really dives into the last time these two teams met. Very unique circumstances for the Hokies and Thunder and Herd. So, TK, what do you got for us?
Well, the last time these two teams matched up was a bit of an interesting case. In 2018, due to Hurricane Florence, both teams, Marshall and Virginia Tech, had games canceled due to the weather. Virginia Tech couldn't play their Group of 5 team East Carolina, and Marshall couldn't play their Power 5 team in South Carolina. So, after the final week of the season, with Virginia Tech's long bowl streak on the line, sitting at 5-6 after a really crucial and shaky overtime win over their arch rival in Virginia, Virginia Tech said to Marshall, "We'll pay you $300,000 and scheduling considerations if you come to Lane and play us for a chance to be bowl eligible." Well, Virginia Tech won that game back in 2018 in a dominant fashion over, at the time, an 8-3 Marshall Thundering Herd squad. Well, it's 2023, and those future scheduling considerations have come to light. Marshall welcomes Virginia Tech into Huntington, West Virginia, in what is the biggest home game for the Thundering Herd in quite some time. Marshall and Virginia Tech, two teams separated by one state line, will meet for the first time in 5 years, all thanks to Hurricane Florence in 2018.
Thanks, Tyler. All right, guys, let's get into some picks here. Let's do a little round table here, rapid fire. Here we go. Friday night, NC State, Virginia, Scott Stadium. Wes, who you got?
NC State.
Give me the Wolfpack.
Okay. I'm also going to take NC State. Brennan Armstrong making his return trip to Charlottesville. Florida State, Clemson, noon, Saturday. Rob.
I like Florida State.
Ooh.
Dabo Swinney and them Tigers.
I got Clemson too. Man, the Tigers are tough to beat at home. Number 18, Duke. How about that? The Blue Devils going to Connecticut. UConn, the Huskies. Wes.
The Blue Devils winning it for sure.
Not a team I'd expect to be ranked in the Blue Devils. I also think they'll win it.
I go Duke. Another road trip to a Group of 5 stadium for the ACC. Number 20, Miami at Temple in Philadelphia. Rob.
Give me Temple with the upset.
Temple, okay.
My mom's alma mater, Miami.
Ooh, all about the U, baby. All about the U. Manny Diaz has got him going. Boston College, Louisville. That's another interesting one. Go ahead, Wes.
Boston College.
Boston College.
Yeah. That's
okay.
a hard one.
Give me the Cardinals.
I think Louisville wins too. BC gave Florida State some trouble last weekend, but
That's what I was thinking. Louisville, I know they're undefeated, but Boston College gave FSU a little ride.
I think Louisville's good. Jeff Braun, baby. The Cardinals, they got them rolling.
Undefeated.
In the Ville. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Georgia Tech, Wake Forest on the CW in Winston-Salem. Rob, who you got?
I like the Hornets in this one.
The Yellow Jackets.
The Yellow Jackets.
Yellow Jackets.
Yellow Jackets.
You were
Wow.
close. Come on, Rob.
Man.
Come on. Georgia Tech, Wake Forest. Okay, so he's got Georgia Tech. Who you got, Wes?
I got Wake Forest for sure.
I think I got Wake too. Georgia Tech, I mean, they're showing progress under Brent Key, but I think overall they're not ready to take that next step. All right, number 16, North Carolina, the Tar Heels. They look good with the Heisman contender going to Pitt to take on the Panthers. Rob.
I like the Panthers in this one.
Okay.
I'm going with UNC. I don't think Pitt really has what it takes.
This is a tricky one for me because North Carolina, Drake May, you go to, I'm going to say Heinz Field. It's Acquisition Stadium now, but you go to Heinz Field. It's a tough place to play. I think Carolina has looked vulnerable at times, but I think they've shown they're a pretty dang good football team. And Pitt, while the offense is very subsided, I think the defensive side of the ball can get the job done.
Well,
all right.
I'll say about this. Drake May, we saw him last year, phenomenal job. I know he struggled this year, and he's going to get together.
Yeah, they've just had some close calls. I mean, they took care of South Carolina and Charlotte. App State at home, double overtime, I want to say. And I don't know, though. I'll go Carolina. Okay. I'll go Carolina. Yeah. Our game, here we go. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into this one. Virginia Tech, Marshall, Jones C. Edwards Stadium in Huntington, West Virginia. Do the Hokies move to 2-2? Mr. Robert Bateman, what do you got for us?
I feel like if Virginia Tech can win the turnover battle, they will still lose. I'm taking Marshall.
Okay. Wesley.
We've been talking about the show, and even back at home, the run. They have to be able to run it. The running game has to continue with drones, and also on the defensive side, they have to stop the run. I mean, in 2018, going back to that, Marshall was able to run, and this time, the offense isn't as good as back in 2018. So you got to run the ball. Passing isn't everything, and this is a running team, and they have to get that together.
So Marshall, Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech.
Okay. This is another tough one, right?
Break the
I
tie.
mean, you're going to Huntington.
That's true.
It's going to be a very tough place to play. And Virginia Tech has not looked like a very good football team the last 2 weeks. I mean, that's just the truth, unfortunately. But I don't know. I think Virginia Tech will out-talent Marshall, but at the same time, you're probably without your starting quarterback, most likely Grant Wells, which is such a shame, too. I mean, going back to Huntington, a 2-year starter there, you're without your starting quarterback. You're definitely without wide receiver 1, Ollie Jennings. And you may be without Jalen Lane, too, wide receiver 2. Defensively, Kendall went through all the injuries. Long story short, I think Marshall beats Virginia Tech on Saturday. I think the Hokies fall to 1-3. And to your point earlier, Rob, I think they could be staring potentially 1-5 in the face with both Pitt and Florida State coming up.
It would have been in that nice little story if you saw Grant Wells get his little revenge tour.
It would have been great. There's so many connections. Grant Wells.
Brent Pry had some time in West Virginia. His dad actually played for Marshall.
Played
as
at
a
Marshall,
quarterback.
yes. Grew up in West Virginia. I think he said, Brent Pry in his press conference earlier this week, he spent the first 4 or 5 years in Huntington on Earth. So he was born in Huntington, which is pretty cool. J.C. Price, C.J. McCray, Grant Wells, all going back to Huntington. I think the Herd gets it done. Keys to the game. Give me a quick one. Rob.
Stop the run. Very simple. If Virginia Tech stops the run, it'll help them tremendously in that game.
I've been talking about the running game, but if I see drones pass for 190 yards again, I think they will win by more than one score.
I think Drones passes for 250.
Okay, well, there you go.
He should have last week, and if Daquan Felton rolls in the one down the far sideline. So, well, that will do it for this week's edition of the 3304 Kickoff Show. Hokies and Marshall coming up from Huntington this weekend. For our entire crew, we say so long from the Moss Art Center in Blacksburg.